A lot of you may not know this, but I am a very avid reader. So far, I've started my year off reading fun, easy-to-get-into novels like The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker and Psycho by Robert Bloch. But recently, I just finished No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, and it completely changed my perspective on literature. I actually finished the original version yesterday, but I read the manga adaptation by Junji Ito about 3 weeks ago. It stayed on my mind, so I decided to do a little deep dive into the story and give you my thoughts. Now, first off, I want to praise Junji Ito for his adaptation. It's a beautifully written manga and the art looks amazing. This is only the second manga by Junji that I've read. The first one was Frankenstein, and I'm really getting into his style of writing and drawing. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the story. I'm going to be breaking down the story from beginning to end. So if you're worried about spoilers, this is your warning. Please do yourselves a favor and read the original or the adaptation before moving on in this video. Then go ahead and come back to listen to me talk about it.
It's the one and only latest to the tape, covering the movies, books, any and everything. So if it's 9:30 and you're sitting on your ass, dark outside and you want time pass, come take a seat about once every week and listen to a late take breakdown piece.
Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human is a novel that lingers in the mind long after reading, not just for its bleak themes, but for its raw confessional style. It is a tragic exploration of alienation, self-destruction, and the suffocating weight of societal expectations. Told through a series of notebooks left behind by the protagonist, the novel is the line between fiction and autobiography, making it feel deeply personal. The novel begins with an unnamed narrator who discovers a series of notebooks written by a man named Oba Yozo. Before diving into Yozo's writings, the narrator presents 3 eerie photographs of him at different stages of his life. In each, Yozo's expression is disturbingly empty, hinting at the downward spiral that his story will unfold. Yozo's notebooks begin with his childhood, where he describes himself as someone who has always felt disconnected from other people. He cannot understand human emotions or behavior, so he develops a strategy to cope. He becomes a clown, playing the fool to mask his inability to connect. His family, especially his strict and wealthy father, sees him as a troublemaker, but his classmates and teachers are entertained by his antics. Beneath the surface, however, Yozo is terrified of being exposed as an imposter, someone who is merely imitating humanity without actually feeling it. As Yozo grows older, his detachment deepens. He moves to Tokyo for school, but quickly falls into a life of hedonism, surrounding himself with artists, drunks, and misfits. He befriends a cynical student named Horiki, who introduces him to alcohol and prostitutes, further pulling him away from any semblance of a normal life. Yozo's relationships with women become increasingly destructive. He does not know how to love in a conventional way, and instead lets himself be used, drifting from one woman to another without truly connecting. His first major downfall comes when he meets a married woman with whom he shares a brief yet intense affair. The two decide to commit suicide together by jumping into the sea, but only she dies. Yozo survives. This failed double suicide marks the beginning of his complete unraveling. He is racked with guilt but feels no real emotion, only an increasing sense of detachment from society. His family disowns him, seeing him as a disgrace. After the suicide attempt, Yozo is taken in by a woman named Yoshiko, whose pure and innocent nature offers him a fleeting chance at redemption. She truly loves him, and for a short while he attempts to live a normal life. However, his demons catch up with him once more when Horiki re-enters his life, reintroducing him to alcohol and indulgence. Yozo's self-destructive tendencies resurface, and his relationship with Yoshiko is shattered when she is assaulted in front of him. Instead of protecting her, he watches in helpless detachment. This event cements his belief that he is no longer human, incapable of love, courage, or dignity. Yozo's decline accelerates as he falls deeper into addiction and despair. He becomes dependent on morphine and is eventually confined to a mental institution. He is physically and emotionally wrecked, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. By the time he is released, he has lost everything: his family, his dignity, his will to live. The final pages of the novel return to the unnamed narrator, who reveals that Yozo died shortly after leaving the institution. In the end, his life was one long attempt to navigate a world he never understood, and his ultimate failure solidifies the novel's haunting conclusion. No Longer Human is a devastating character study, an unflinching look at what it means to feel completely alien in a world that demands conformity. Yozo's story is both deeply personal and universally resonant, capturing the pain of those who feel like they do not belong. It is a novel that does not offer redemption or hope, only the stark reality of a man who never truly found his place among the living. Now, you might think this is where the story ends, but there's actually a story behind the story. Osamu Dazai, born Shuji Tsushima in 1909, was a writer who lived a life filled with turmoil, self-destruction, and a constant struggle with his own identity. He was born into an upper-class family in Kanagi, Japan, but despite his privileged upbringing, he felt like an outsider from a young age. The expectations placed upon him clashed with his artistic ambitions, leading him down a path of rebellion, addiction, and repeated suicide attempts. Dazai's early life was marked by a constant effort to escape reality. He idolized Western literature, particularly the works of Dostoevsky and Rimbaud, and gravitated toward the bohemian lifestyle of Tokyo's literary scene. He attended the University of Tokyo but never completed his studies, instead falling into a cycle of drinking, smoking, and struggling to find meaning in his existence. His relationships with women were often tumultuous. He was deeply dependent on them but could never form stable attachments. He had affairs, multiple marriages, and even convinced at least 2 women to attempt suicide with him. His writing reflected his life, dark, cynical, and painfully introspective. His works often explored themes of isolation, self-loathing, and the impossibility of true human connection. No Longer Human was the culmination of these ideas, and written near the end of his life when his despair had reached its peak. It was serialized in 1948, during a time when Japan was still reeling from the aftermath of World War II. While the novel doesn't directly discuss the war, its themes of alienation and disillusionment resonated deeply with the Japanese public, many of whom felt lost in the rapidly changing world. At first glance, No Longer Human reads like a novel, a fictional account of a man named Oba Yozo who struggles with his inability to connect with society. However, as you dive deeper, it becomes clear that this is more than just a story. It is an unfiltered, uttered confession. The parallels between Yozo and Dazai are undeniable. Both were born into wealthy families, but felt alienated from them. Both drowned themselves in alcohol and self-destructive habits. Both attempted multiple suicides. The novel reads as if Dazai is putting his soul on display, showing the world every failure, every fear, every moment of shame. Then comes the final, tragic twist. Shortly after completing No Longer Human, Dazai took his own life. In June 1948, just as the novel was being published in full, he and his lover, Tomi Yamazaki, drowned themselves in the Tamagawa Canal. His body was found days later on what would have been his 39th birthday. It was as if No Longer Human had been his final statement, a farewell letter disguised as fiction. The realization hits like a gut punch. Yozo wasn't just a character, he was Dazai all along. The novel wasn't just a story, it was his own life laid bare, with no redemption, no salvation, only a final descent into nothingness. It's this truth that makes No Longer Human so haunting. It wasn't just written by a man in pain, it was written by a man who had already decided he could not go on. When I first did my research and learned that the author had taken his own life after his book was being published, it blew me away. It made me really sit down and think about my future and what I should be doing in this world. That's really why I decided to make this video. Not only because I think this novel needs to be talked about more, but also because I feel like people can really learn from it. If you are feeling depressed or having any sort of suicidal thoughts, please contact someone immediately. Remember that life is worth living to its fullest. Not to end the video on a downer, but that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and be sure to hit the like button. If you want to recommend anything specific that we should cover, go ahead and put it in the comments below. And if you want to watch a video discussing why High Fidelity is a classic movie, click the video on screen. I've been Mark, and this is the end of the video. Thank you for watching.
It's the one and only latest to the take, covering the movies, books, any and everything. So if it's 9:30 and you're sitting on your ass, dark outside and you want time pass, come take a seat about once every week and listen to a late take breakdown piece.